I don't know, Jen, when I try to log into that page, it says waiting, but I'm not usually the person to confirm that, so.
Thank you for checking.
Waiting right now as well.
I don't know, Jen, when I try
We're live.
that page, it says waiting.
There we go.
Who said we're live?
Stacy did.
It looks live now.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, good morning. We good to kick this off then?
I am.
Excellent. All right, perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Good morning to the September 11th Acute Care Advisory Council meeting. Before we get started, Jen, you want to conduct a roll call to verify we have a quorum before proceeding?
I can do that, certainly. All right, Tom Delaney. Carol Backstrom. Natasha Merce.
Good morning. This is Amy Peterson. I am here in Natasha Mers's place.
Thank you. Brad Johnson.
Here.
Susan Pleasance.
Present.
Thank you. Oh, Tom Delaney's here in chat. And Cindy St. George.
Here.
Jessica Simisak.
Here.
Savannah Johnson. Kathy Chavers. Jody Donne.
I'm here.
Mary Kosling. Janelle Hubbard.
I'm here.
Randy Baumgart. Angela Baja. Jade Couture. Sheila Grissom. Josh Berg.
Here.
Nicole Muchek. Laura Arnold.
Here.
All right. 1, 2. All right, you have 10 council members at this point, so 1 away from quorum.
And I believe there might have been a few folks that you called that I see that are logged on, but maybe didn't say here. So going by that, I mean, I count at least 12, if not 13. But
Right, let me see here. Oh, Jade, you're here? Perfect.
and Mary as well.
Mary is here as well. I see that.
And Jen, this is Stacy. I see Tom Delaney is on from Department of Education.
Thank you. Yep. Tom put his yes, and I'm here in chat, so that was great. All right, then you're at 12, then quorum has been met.
Awesome. All right, well, thank you for that. Welcome everybody. So we'll call the meeting to order officially then. Before we get started, again, just these first couple slides, just highlight the purpose of the council and our 3 tasks or objectives. 1 being to improve the regional capacity for acute care transitions. The second one being to create a measurement and evaluation system using implementation science. And 3, statewide strategies addressing geographic, racial, and ethnic disparities in addressing acute care transitions. The next slide is the visual image of our vision that was taken at the beginning from all the council members, and just kind of frames it all up in a more visual format for everybody. As a review too, and to remind everybody that this is being streamed online. We also have a public viewing opportunity here at Elmer Andersen. If you're watching this online via the live stream, please note there is about a 20-second delay between the meeting and the live stream. Comments can be submitted via email that's listed on the slide here. And then during the open session, there'll be an opportunity for folks to provide public comment if they are interested as well. As we've said many times before, comments are welcomed, encouraged, and all public comments are being sent directly to each council member, analyzed for themes, and will be considered for as the council develops recommendations within the final report. The next slide it has the agenda for today. This is what was posted online, and I believe. Yeah, no, that's all I need to say about that, assuming that everybody is good with this, so we can go on to the next slide, unless there's recommendations for changes or anything like that.
Do you need to?
We should probably adopt the agenda, perhaps. Is that what you're suggesting? Yes.
Yeah.
So if there's no questions or comments, I would take a motion to adopt the agenda for today.
I move.
We have a motion by Laura. I'll second. This is Josh. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? And the agenda is adopted. Now we can move on to the next slide, which is the review and approval of the meeting minutes. The minutes were distributed to all the council members in the packet. Are there any questions or additions or correct that folks would like to make to the minutes? And if none, can I get a motion to approve the minutes for the August 14th meeting?
I move.
We have a motion by Laura. I will second that one to keep us moving along. Any further comments or questions? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? And the meeting minutes are adopted. So now I believe I can, well, I'll kick this off maybe, and then I'll turn it over to Rachel or Jen or whoever. But just wanted to call this out for folks. You know, kudos to this group for continuing to meet on a regular basis. It's been a lot of work in a short amount of time, but very important work to get done. In looking at what we have left to do, there was some discussion and work with Natasha and DHS to kind of figure out the timing of everything, working with Rachel and team to continue to make sure that we incorporate all of the focus group information, all the feedback from the council members, any public comment that come in. And on the left-hand side is really kind of what was the original plan to be able to get everything in. However, what that doesn't account for is a lot of the additional steps and pieces to this process that we really need to get in and get done, essentially, so that we can do what I would say is, you know, our job to bring forth a comprehensive just feedback and report. So on the right hand side with the right column, it talks about maybe an extended timeline to be able to submit everything. And Rachel or Amy, I don't know if one of you wants to kind of talk through that and maybe some additional commentary. I mean, this too was discussed at the agency level, and from my understanding, there won't be any harm done in extending this a bit. In fact, it will allow, like I said, that time for some of the essential pieces that need to get done to actually do this really well and to incorporate everything that we need to incorporate. So Rachel or anybody else, do you want to provide additional context?
Yeah, and I'll jump in and just a quick question for Amy too, which is the conversation we had was that it is possible and has been done before to kind of extend the backward plan to October 31st. But I know that Natasha was checking on this just to make sure that we had approval. So Amy, I don't know if you all had heard yet, whether that's technically the case. We're prepared to do either one. But obviously, like Josh said, it's going to be better for us to do this more closely with you and finalizing the report, et cetera, to do the October 31st. So Amy, I don't know, did you hear anything?
I don't have confirmation yet, but I will chime in as soon as I'm able to provide that.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, and you know, the sense that Natasha had was this is a council decision. And so we want you all to kind of make that decision, but then Natasha's checking on this, you know, extension because she felt like it's, you know, it would be very doable, but she just needs to get that approval to move forward that way.
So maybe on that note, then, you know, open it up for a quick discussion with the council. You know, I think I tried to make my point clear of, I think it's imperative that we go with the extended version if the approval is granted so that we can make sure we check all the boxes, we don't rush anything through. And the last thing I want to do, or I think that any of us want to do, is to put forth a report or recommendations that aren't as comprehensive as they could be. And we don't want to necessarily delay anything because another piece of this is making sure that if there is any legislative or immediate actions that we can start to take, and knowing that that process is well underway right now. And we want to make sure that we can fit within that window to get that information to the agency and to the legislature so that we can really leverage the 2025 session for anything that we think needs to get done sooner rather than later. So I guess I'll open it up. The feedback or comments if anybody has any.
I'll just add one last thing, Josh, which is just so you know, I'll be doing a little review of the focus groups and interviews. Literally the last one that was done was last night, thanks to Danny. And we have the opportunity to interview somebody who represents our Indigenous community, but it's a little bit later. So that was some of the considerations that we had, plus knowing that you all want to be involved in, you know, editing and making sure that this is all, you know, really representing the council's viewpoints.
Well, not seeing anybody jumping up and down saying, oh my gosh, no, we can't or shouldn't consider extending if it's possible. I guess the other piece that I would plug to is, and we'll get to this later on, I believe, with you know, kind of looking at the quality metrics or the comments from the council. We haven't even gotten full participation from the council in some of those comments. So I think this would allow additional time for those that haven't been able to provide their feedback to be able to do so, so that we can incorporate that into the final report as well.
Yeah, and Amy just highlighted there's a typo on the October 31st backward plan. I'm not sure how that sub bullet at the very end came into place, but it's not MDH, it's DHS. So.
And thank you, Brad. I see your comment in the chat, just suggesting if possible, we should extend. All right, well, seeing some head nods and no massive disagreement, I think, Rachel, if you're okay, we can proceed with that kind of assumption. And then Amy, if you hear something from anybody on your end saying yes or no or something, then just let us know. Otherwise, we'll go with that assumption. And if we need to do something, we can.
Yep, and Amy, just know that if we do need to go with October 2nd, the report is written, but we would need to do public comment. So we would need to kind of get the report out to everybody like tomorrow. we're gonna send it anyway, but like we'd have to get feedback from everybody and that sort of thing. So it's a tight timeline, as Josh pointed out. So just wanted you to know that, Amy, in case you run into kind of needing to find people. Great.
All right, well, then we can move to the next slide and I can hand it over to Laura to kick this off.
Oh, and Laura, I think I'm the one up, just so you know, to present.
Okay, so next on the agenda, we're going to give the update on the focus group and interviews that we were just discussing in regards to timeline. And Rachel is going to run us through that discussion.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was listed. All right, so I just needed to wait a minute before I could get to my screen. And let me just pull this up. All right. So as we do every meeting, we have the three major requests from the legislature that we address: our regional issues, our measurement, and health equity disparity sort of issues. We, in one of our activities and meetings, I can't remember exactly which one, we wrote the evaluation questions together and we talked about what data sources. And is this presented right? Are you seeing the actual?
No,
You are
you're seeing the presenter side.
I'm seeing it, or you're seeing
Now
it?
we're seeing your side. Yep. Now we're seeing the right vision. Yep. Thanks.
Thank you. I was like, hey, I don't think this is working. Okay. So you just can see like which types of sources of data are answering each of the questions that we have. So I won't go through that in big detail because you've already seen these and we've gone through it. The big issue we wanted you to know about is this is where we're at. We have overall, we took the council transcripts. We took focus groups interviews, and we're at 64 people contributing across all of those data sources. In focus groups, we had 2 focus groups, as we discussed. There were 9 people, so 5 in one and 4 in the other, representing county case managers, providers. The area of the state was a metro in the Northeast. I don't know, Danny, were there any other areas represented in your focus group last night?
Yeah, we did have some from northern Minnesota there too as well.
Okay, thanks. And then for the interviews, I need to move my little screen thing here.
I also want to note, and you may have said this, but that's not on here. There were family representatives, right? Representation last night, Danny?
Yes.
Yeah, came in.
Yeah, and then also for interviews, you see we've got 2 interviews so far, but there's 2 more coming in. I just got a text from Stacy. We do have some people with lived experience who are weighing in. They're doing it through the state side since we can't participate in the data collection part of things. But Stacy will be able to represent, and that's tomorrow, Stacy, is that right? And so then interviews so far are, you see my notes page. Are you guys seeing the slides? I think that one was.
Your slides. I think you fixed it. Maybe.
Yeah, I think Stacy, I think I was getting an old text. I always have to check and see what's happening on the texting. Okay, so we'll go on. Again, I'm moving my people around. You guys are always in the way, but that is not a criticism. The complex transition team came up in the focus group. So one of the what I try to do is highlight some of the things that may help with our decision making. And one of those things is that the complex transition team was mentioned by some of our participants as being incredibly helpful, and both for county and providers in addressing acute care issues. I think there were a couple comments early on that there were some challenges in getting started, but like it's been really clear from the process that the complex transition team has been really helpful. So I thought that would be helpful for you all to know as you're making decisions about the regional pilot. Improving statewide coordination and communication came up as a really high kind of comment. A lot of participants have stated, just as you did as council members, that we would benefit from having some kind of communication system, an online portal or hub. So that is getting confirmed and triangulated is what we would refer to in this case. And then the other issue is investing in funding that guarantees statewide transition planning can occur before somebody's released to the community. A lot of people have been talking about how important it is to figure out that piece, which is, we know we need to move people out of the hospitals. We know that people need some time to make sure they are placed in a situation that they are comfortable with, are safe, et cetera. So those are coming up, again, triangulating what you all have talked about. State support for innovative use of technology is a different piece that we haven't really talked about. And in particular, there were discussions about how it's been difficult for providers working with counties to have the use of technology support acute care transitions and addressing barriers, because oftentimes it gets perceived as duplication of support. So that was something that people said would be really helpful. And then culture of safety came up, and it came up, I've got a few quotes that if you wanted to see, I can pull them up, but culture of safety is a positive support. And one of the things that happens in acute care situations is providers feel oftentimes that when something goes wrong, the fingers kind of point towards them, or in sort of, the potential for abuse and things like that get called up, and there's some legal processes that we have to follow, and all of those kind of things. The participants really highlighted the fact that in the places where culture of safety has been used, it's made a really positive contribution to providers who are supporting people that might have more complex and complicated sort of things going on. Strategies are needed to provide incentives. So that came up just as it has within the council. In particular, you'll see stories about needing to offset the cost of property destruction, as you discussed, accessing capacity building that can make it easier to access positive supports. So a lot of providers in our focus groups and interviews have talked about the need to have maybe the rates changed with the positive support services, that it's not quite working. And then in our rural areas, it's very difficult to find anybody. And it's all kind of linked up to maybe making some of those kind of larger changes to make it more accessible for training, and also make it more of a cost-effective approach for providers. And then assisting providers in situations where they're securing housing that might require one-on-one versus more group home sort of settings, and making sure that in situations with acute care barriers that we can access possibly more expensive housing sort of decisions, and that gets expedited or supported. Changing policies to increase training and use of positive support came up a lot, so I mentioned it again. In particular around, there's 3 levels within the positive support services. It's difficult for the analyst level to be addressed. And the quote, here's the pay rate for professionals is too low. You're not going to get a professional, and the qualifications for an analyst, it's just virtually impossible. So those are things that we need to look at if we're going to make our positive supports available to people to actually engage in that effective transition planning. And also direct support curriculum and training for PCAs, for direct support staff, those all came up. And then finally, improving training related to acute care issues. So the particular issues around training for hospital discharge planners, training for contracted case managers, guardianship, training around new policy changes, access to training that helps providers access positive support. So those are the things that have been coming up in outside of the council and in the focus groups and interviews. So any questions that you might have about those? Okay, pretty standard and triangulated with what you've all been saying. This is the process that we're following, and then I won't go through all of the slides here. I just wanted to make sure that you saw what we're doing for the report. And the report has been written, but we're kind of squeezing in these focus groups and interviews as they come in at the end. And so they've been concurrently occurring, right? So more of the quantitative data in public reports, but there are some qualitative public reports as well. And then the qualitative, what we would kind of call the evaluation that we've been doing, kind of comes through this other side. So those are all in step 1. We're analyzing those separately, and then we're merging. So we're looking for, are there discrepancies or differences across the different data sources, or are they all triangulating? And you can see from the focus group themes that they are very much in line with what the council has been talking about. There's a few things that kind of vary a little bit, and so we're kind of pulling those to share with you. And then summarizing the results. So that's kind of our job behind the scenes in pulling all of this together. And the last thing I'll say is the qualitative analysis has been looking at themes. And so we have 4 major themes, barriers around acute care. So a lot of conversation about that. types of experiences. So that's that issue that we talked about with respect to, and I think somebody said it in the notes when they were scoring, there are these pathways of different systems involved in supporting people who have different types of barriers. And so you can see these different pathways come up, and the results are really very much about, in particular, behavioral health, mental health, and behavioral events kind of squeezed together into the most common sort of challenges coming up. Older adults come up in some data sources. Children come up across data sources as far as having the most frequent discharge delays and challenges. Substance abuse disorder comes up as sort of like that next level. And then the kind of the administrative system stuff is discussed. And then we kind of go through different interventions and strategies. In the report, we don't talk about every single one of these. We've kind of just put them together into the 4 major categories so that it kind of streamlines the process. And then health equity and disparities is the 4th. Okay, so just really quickly, from the qualitative side, as I said, children engaging in acute aggression or self-injury with a history of trauma, they have oftentimes dual diagnosis. Our BIPOC community and citizens of tribal nations are overrepresented in the acute care barriers. Considered by providers as hard to serve. So that's kind of oftentimes comes up with regards to people who are having the most challenges in transition. Active representation and direct involvement of people from the diverse communities has been discussed in the council, that it would be good to have a diverse group within this council. If we were to continue forward, that would be one of the things that we'd probably want to recommend. Time for planning is needed for transitions and really having that discussion. I think the overall message that we see across these 2 data sources is that there's not enough funds supporting community services. There's a real push towards moving to include more beds and supports in more restrictive placements. And there's a balance between these 2 that are really important to figure out. And as all of you have said, we don't quite have all the information yet to make those kind of decisions. So having the decision to move forward in the way that kind of allows us to continue forward is a really good recommendation that you all had. The regional problem solving comes up as a theme, as very important in recommendations. And then the disincentives. There's more disincentives right now for providers than there are incentives. And so thinking about both of those pieces are really important. On the quantitative side, I know we're really more familiar with those data, so I won't go through that all in detail, but again, you see the disproportional sort of experience. You see the most common characteristics around behavioral issues and dysregulation in younger people. As I said, some of our studies are pulling older adults 65 plus, and also bariatric sort of issues coming up around complex barriers. So, overall, it looks like our different data sources are confirming a lot of what we've seen. And I think what I'm seeing is that regional database decision-making becomes really critical, because in some regions, it may be more around things like participants have talked about issues around substance abuse disorder, like beds and facilities have closed down regionally, which makes it more difficult to address some of those issues, and people are more likely to be sent to other places. The other thing that, last thing is, you'll see some quotes in the report around the need for statewide oversight, but regional kind of processes, because some of our adults and children are being sent all across the state. And so every time they end up in a are they have a different psychiatrist, they have a different transition team. And without that statewide coordination, it's making it very difficult. And people are kind of just traveling around, having more trauma, essentially, as a result of all of this. So those are the things that we've been finding so far. The quote from the literature review was, failing to invest in interventions that would build effective community services for people with complex needs has led to, moving our problems to the hospital settings. We need to solve that. And those are the things that we found. This is just a summary that shows you where those messages came from. across the different data sources, so I won't go through it in detail, but just know the major findings is that we need a number of different interventions. We can't just solve this with one easy kind of way to proceed forward, and that we have a deep sort of intersection with our health equity, as well as the need to solve the acute care transitions issues. So I'll leave it at that. I don't want to spend too much time because I know we need to get to discussion. Jen, I wonder if we can pull up our PowerPoint again. I'll stop sharing here.
I can do that.
Any questions while she's doing that? Things that you would want to add or comment on? Danny and Jen, I know you guys have been more directly involved in the people who've been sharing some of the newer information, and even last night. So feel free to jump in.
I just think last night from the family perspective is that I heard a lot of information about the fact that there's not specific programming out there that matches what children are needing, especially children who have the dual diagnosis of mental health and lower IQs. So there's no facility to be able to put them in for stabilization that can help with both of those areas, and with the mental health treatment around children with lower IQs is almost non-existent in the state right now. So that was a theme that I hadn't really heard before in some of the focus groups, or hadn't been focused on as much.
Thanks, Danny. Another thing that you triggered a memory for me, which is the other thing that has come up across a number of participants is situations where family members have their legal rights taken within that transition process. And some of those are overrepresentation, like in the rural areas. There was a discussion about a study that was done, or a project that adoptive parents with children who are BIPOC were more likely to have that experience where there was a challenge to legal decision making. So I thought that would be important to share as you talk, Danny.
Yeah, and another thing that triggered my memory too, that came up in a couple of different focus groups, but really in the last night focus group too, was around the fact that children who can't find placement, who've been refused admission to the hospital because they're not in acute care, but yet they don't have community services, are being held in juvenile detention centers instead of in any other place. So they're really kind of criminalizing that situation in which there's no real charges, but they are being held in juvenile detention centers because there's no other place to put them.
Yeah, Danny, that comes up in some other data, in some other participants' data as well. And then the other piece, just to finalize this, and I think, Brad, you mentioned it, which is it was described as an intake transition problem, which is when youth are incarcerated or people are incarcerated and needing to go to acute care, there are delays as well. So some of our folks have really emphasized the need to maybe not focus just on transition, to actually move towards that more preventative focus. Okay. So that's where we're at. And of course, I don't have the stuff from Danny yet. So I've been busy in, adding that into the report. We do have the report written. We can send it to you now. It's just that there's some missing data, obviously. And there's places in the report that it's actually too long right now and it needs to be chopped up, but we wanted to kind of get all the information in there and then shorten it and make it more concise. So we're going to talk about that later. So we'll kind of move on from here and hand it over to who's next. Is it?
I can kick us off, and then we'll probably kick it right back. Well, then we'll kick it over maybe to Danny. But so the next part will be kind of going through the council recommendations, the survey form that was sent out a while ago that gave the opportunity for council members to rate and provide comments on the recommendations. And so we'll go through that next, and maybe kick it back over to you, Rachel, and or Danny, to walk us through this.
Actually, Jen and I are going to handle this one. We'll hand it over to Laura and Danny once we get kind of through the overall kind of update on the data. So Jen, do you want to kick off?
Sure, I'll kick it off. This is the information as of last night, or yesterday afternoon. We have 8 responses. That's a 42% response rate. And within the survey itself, you were asked to provide input on the recommendations in 2 prongs. One was, do you support this recommendation? Yes, no, and then additional input. The additional input selection precluded you from being able to do yes or no. So I looked at the additional input. Sometimes the additional input said yes and provided some other notes. If the additional input did not give a clear indication of a yes or a no, then it just went into additional input. So that's why you see some of these with additional input instead of yes. So overall high percent of agreement on each of the recommendations. I have this summarized. You provided input on the global recommendation and all of the subheadings underneath that. The PDF document that was sent had additional detail for those subheadings. And you'll see this in a second when I share it with my other screen with you. And so what I just did is I looked at the recommendation as a whole to see just globally within that recommendation where the agreement fell in the level of importance. And so there was more variability in feedback on level of importance for some of these recommendations. And so that's where I think we can kind of take you all at this point. We want to open up a little bit of discussion on how you all want to use your time efficiently to go through these recommendations again. And one of the suggestions that we have, and I'm going to stop sharing now and share the more detailed summary of this. Here, what you'll see is, let me scroll up. The same information here as far as the number of council members and the responses. But in this table, I have the recommendation and the sub-recommendation in each row. So this is 1A, 1B, 1C, etc. The level of support, yes, no, additional input. The additional input is here, and then a high, medium, and low. One thing that we highlighted just this morning before getting on here is we highlighted in green those items that had either a response of like 7 or 8 in the yes support for this and high importance. That was one thing that we thought might help streamline the conversation. But again, it's up to you all how you want to address, if you want to go through each and every one. But the ones in green on here have a high level of agreement and low level of variability in responses. All right. The ones that are not in green are ones that have greater variability, and the variability is always in the area of level of importance, high, medium, or low. All right. So I think that what I can do at this point, Laura and Danny, is turn it over to you to maybe just facilitate the discussion on how the council wants to move forward. If you want to go through all of these or just the ones that are not highlighted in green. If you choose to do the ones that are not highlighted in green, there are 11 items. And with the time that we have, I would say you have approximately like 10 minutes for each item.
And maybe before we get to that, is it fair to say, Jen and Rachel and Danny, for those council members that have not provided response to do so, to still do so? Would they still have the opportunity to do that and get it incorporated, or are we beyond that time to have them go in and fill it out and provide feedback? Is it necessary?
I think that's a really good question, Josh. I think if we have the extension that we have the time to let people weigh in and vote and get everybody's in, because then we could finalize the recommendation. So we could be working on editing the report and then finalize. We have one more meeting on September 30th. And I'd have to look, Jen, at the PowerPoint. I don't think I printed that one off of the timeline. I think we actually put that in, didn't we?
Let me go back to that timeline
Yeah,
slide.
if you don't mind, let's look at the timeline just so we can make a informed decision. My memory is that that would be voting on recommendation. We could delay, allow people the people haven't responded yet to vote. And then we could move forward. The problem is that we'll have to, if we're going to get this done, we'd have to have that vote on recommendations on the 30th, no matter what.
Mhm.
So I guess my plug would be, if we get the extension, and expectation, hopefully from everybody that's on this council, to get that in and get your recommendations and votes completed by, the end of the week or whatever, as soon as humanly possible, if you want your feedback to be incorporated in a more formalized way. Obviously, we'll have these discussions and be able to dig into it that way, but I think it would be important to have full or very full participation from this council to provide the recommendations.
So, I think what you're suggesting, Josh, is maybe we do go through every item and maybe we make the green ones a little faster if that works, but that would also be another alternative. People could still fill out the Qualtrics, but if you're concerned about certain items, this would be the time that you could weigh in on those. We are wanting to make sure that if there are things that we need to change, that we can do so and make sure that we have the recommendations in the way that the council feels they need to be written.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not suggesting one way or another for today. I think it's imperative that we get as much feedback as possible and it gets incorporated. And however, Laura, Danny, and the rest of the group feels we go through today, I'm totally cool with it. But I've been struggling with so many folks wanting and thinking they have different ideas for everything and then not providing the feedback. Like, we have an opportunity to provide the feedback. Let's provide the feedback and let's provide our comments and do something with this. So I just want us to be accountable.
I think if people are in agreement with this, maybe for the green ones, just quickly read the recommendation and then leave it open if anyone has any differing feedback from what's already written.
Great. So you're suggesting, Laura, maybe hit the green ones, but do them quickly, so not 10 minutes. And then we just, that way, if anybody does have a concern that hasn't responded yet, it would flag that.
Yep.
Okay.
And
then,
go ahead. Go ahead, Laura.
And then people could feel free to continue to put input in the survey as well, but then we'd at least have a highlighted, like, hey, we have more input. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
Great.
Should we start? Okay. So I'll start with recommendation number 1, and that is basically because of the timeline and the complexity of the topic, we are recommending that this council become a standing unit. And then sub-recommendation would be to continue working with complex transitions team and with DHS leaders to review progress in developing new data systems that are put in place as more information are learned and on the process started in this council as a way to monitor how barriers to acute care transitions are addressed. And all of the respondents both labeled this as a supported recommendation and as a high priority. Any additional comment for this recommendation?
Janelle has her hand
Janelle?
raised.
Yep.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Chanel Hubbard from Anoka County. This recommendation, I supported. I think though, however, when we talk about complex transitions team, are you talking about this entire group of people? That's my first question. Or are you looking at condensing that? And when we talk about DHS leaders, who are we talking about, right? There's a lot of DHS leaders, so providing clarification on that. That was my struggle with this, because I don't know how sometimes too many cooks in the kitchen, it's hard to get stuff done. And this feels very large to me, so my recommendation would be specifying your plan for establishing the complex transition and which DHS leaders. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, and I think, Janelle, the second item is like, is it this counselor or something else, right? So maybe this first one is that piece that you just referenced, which is who are the leaders? We know about the complex transition team. Amy, would you have a way to weigh in on who you think would be the key leaders that might be involved in reviewing what's going on within the complex transition team? Because you have the infrastructure.
Do you mean as in with who within DHS would be in support of the complex transition team or versus the council? Because the complex transition team is
It's going to be a relationship, right, Amy? So
Yeah.
we're recommending in further down the line that there are regional systems that the complex transition team's working on. And I think that what Janelle is saying is, how does this, if we're going to say this continues, like who is the contact or lead? I guess that's kind of what and so I thought maybe you might have some ideas.
Yeah. And in that situation, I would say, yeah, that does relate back to my division, my area, or perhaps even me being a point person, or an individual within our chain, representing the complex transition team and delineating that role.
No, I'm thinking as you're talking, so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's all good.
Maybe addressing Janelle's question, which is, maybe we can't answer this right away, but we write it into the recommendation that there is a contact that's established, right? So it gives time to work that out. Is that, Janelle, would that work?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding, the complex transition team is the team at DHS that's currently in place. And Amy, you're the leader of that team. So this question has nothing to do with the group that's on the call right now.
It does, from the point of view that we're talking about, given the timeline and complexity of the topic, that this council, in some sort of format, people are recommending continue. So it could be that the council continues. It could be that something gets established with the complex transition team. But because item number B, 1B is use the ongoing council to expand to additional regions, et cetera. It's like, this is all kind of linked together with the regional systems. So I think that what we're saying is, and I did see a comment somewhere in this additional input that somebody was weighing in to say, maybe it's not a council that continues, maybe it's a group that oversees what's going on with the work that you're doing, Amy, in that complex transition team and regional systems work. If anybody did fill that one out and wants to jump in, please let me know.
So I think, Rachel, like kind of in summaries, and to Janelle's question is, we're looking at these operating in tandem. The complex transition team, which are kind of the boots on the ground, the people that are doing the work with the lead agency, with the institutional setting and so on. Whereas the council is perhaps an entity that we can utilize as a resource, an advisory function to have some bi-directional communication, to help put forth recommendations and ideas and so on.
Yeah, and Brad, I think I just wanted to say, Brad, you kind of threw this into the last meeting as an important consideration that was, everybody really is voting for. Do you have thoughts, Brad, about like how, because I think you used the word standing unit.
Right. So I guess my view is I don't want to lose from the conversation about improvements or solutions to problems, the existing group and kind of the little bit of institutional knowledge that this group has come up with and replace it with something else going forward. And so my view is that this council and the stakeholders that are represented in here would work to receive information and to share ideas back with DHS through the complex transitions team and others like Natasha at DHS and the commissioner and things like that, about how something is working so that this council can have a gentle hand on the wheel of things or an influence on things as they shape up, and then can be supportive of changes at DHS. So I don't know if we need to meet monthly or if we need to meet quarterly, because work needs to be done on the ground as well as things shape up. Hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, so I think the key thing for us is to really, establish the infrastructure for a ongoing support process. And Brad, you're saying a key point of that is to keep the main players that have been guiding this.
Yeah, and I don't know that it needs to be the same specific individuals. I mean, I represent a constituency, right? I represent the County Attorneys Association, and somebody else may stand in my shoes at some point in time, but hopefully by having the same stakeholders represented, we can continue to make improvements.
Okay, if you all are okay with this, I can take a shot at reorganizing the content so that it doesn't say who a state leader is, but it kind of articulates this conversation a little bit better. And if that's okay with everybody, we could, meet the concerns and not necessarily, kind of move on to the next item, but it's totally up to you. So
Jessica does have her hand raised.
Yep.
Oh, thank you, Jessica.
Before you, I also want to let folks know in chat that Natasha did join the meeting.
Oh.
Okay.
Jessica?
Thanks, Laura. And I can lower my hand. It felt like we were kind of starting to talk about 1B, which is where I do have a comment. And so it's related, but if you want me to hold off until we have a chance to I just thought we were starting to write things in down there. And that's where I do have a comment.
These are all meant to be linked, so I think it's fine to do that. I was thinking as everybody was talking, it'd be helpful to see one with all four of the items with it, because it kind of is a unit of information. But I know that we only have one screen. So if you guys want to, you can pull up the short-term recommendations and have that as a way to look at things. But definitely, Jessica, go ahead and jump in on 1B, which is use the ongoing council to expand to additional regions, monitor data systems, et cetera.
Yeah, and I agree with what has been said and with this kind of overarching item, and that the stakeholders, not the individuals, but the, I don't know, organizations or the type of stakeholders should continue on. But my recommendation, and it's already listed there, bullet 2 is mine from the survey, is, maybe this a group with this kind of breadth is coming together quarterly or whatever. But I think to make some progress, sometimes my challenge with the council has been how wide ranging the the populations, and we're talking about, kids, and we're talking about adults, we're talking about a lot of different systems. If we did identify some kind of strands or subgroups, maybe with a few of us who are representing that, those are meeting monthly or something along those lines. But it's so broad that sometimes I worry it limits our ability to make a lot of progress because we just have to speak so broadly. So that was my only comment, and it's already reflected there.
I think that's really helpful. And I've struggled with this as well, just as a facilitator, because thinking about, the need for beds and then the challenges around the different data sources kind of pointing to different groups of people. I mean, is there a way, I think, within these recommendations to clarify that there are different types of characteristics or experiences that we need to follow those? And Janelle, I see your hand is up.
I just raised my hand, Rachel, because for me, this is so big, right? And I feel like if we really hone in on mastering the infrastructure, right, and get that right, then we will then be putting these issues in the hands of more subject matter experts that are going to be able to make those decisions, right? They're going to be able to evaluate, assess, evaluate, and establish a plan. I think that we're trying to accomplish it all when ultimately for me, it's the infrastructure that's not in place that needs to get in place to do the work. And I think all of the information that has been gathered will be able to inform those teams, however they're developed, to do this work. And so I think for me, it's just establishing the infrastructure and making sure we really have that dialed in to move this forward correctly.
Question for you, Janelle. When you say infrastructure, are you talking about like more of the data sharing piece, or are you talking about like actual groups and councils themselves?
I'm talking about all of it. I'm talking about what is the system, what are the people and the tools that are necessary to create a very large system change, right? Like this is a very significant system change. There's a lot of resources that are needed, both manpower and funding. And we as a group are not going to fix that or be able to highlight all that right now. For me, it's like we need to know specifically what councils are in place, who's providing oversight, who's the boots on the ground working on these issues, who has the oversight, and what tools and systems are needed for those people to do that work to create system change. And so for me, that's the primary goal, right? Because there's so many variables here with all of these issues that we as a group, I don't believe are going to be able to answer them all or provide guidance for them all. That needs to be done with the infrastructure that gets built to be able to get the needs met for our people in our community across Minnesota.
I think one of the things I could suggest is when you see 1C, it's complete the long-term recommendations that require more time to complete. And Janelle, you're saying, let's get the initial infrastructure up with the regional systems, let our complex transition team and communities establish and work together, maybe from a statewide perspective, how to do this. Amy, you go ahead and jump in.
Rachel, you were on the right track of what I was going to say is allowing us to develop that infrastructure. And I think to Janelle's point is that currently we're trying to open up the referral system for lead agencies. So counties, tribes, managed care entities to even submit an inquiry to say, hey, we have a person here, we need help. So it's really, I feel like she's correct. We are in our infancy and trying to understand the systemic issues so that we can put something forth with meaningful data behind it to support it. So Janelle, please feel free to check me if I'm on track to your thoughts as well.
No, that's exactly what it is. And it's hard to try to problem solve all these large issues when we don't even have the system in place to do it. So I feel like this work with these individuals that have high complex needs, this is about developing a relationship between DHS and their leaders and teams, the county level, because those relationships and that connectivity is what's going to be able to better support these individuals in getting solutions the most efficiently and effectively. So to me, establishing the infrastructure, establishing the partnerships, building that trust, and then being able to execute the plans that these professionals establish based on their day-to-day work, I feel like is what needs to occur.
So just a question for Jessica, which is 1C is that long-term recommendation. We could put examples in of the pathways so that that's clarified for one of the kind of pieces to focus on in the future, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea.
Okay, because that means I think we've got number one kind of wrapped up, in that if everybody's okay with, getting some of these key pieces in, and we're recording, right? So that like I can go back through and just use your words. And then we'll have that, process of linking long-term recommendations, some examples in there. And then we also have the last piece, which is a focus groups and interviews with people with lived experience, which we are recommending continue forward.
So Rachel, I'm going to interject for a second because I did not hit record until this moment, but we do have the live stream.
Oh yeah, we have the live stream. That's fine.
I was, I think, mainly concerned about the live stream. So, but
yeah,
thank
no,
you.
Jen knows that I like, when you're doing the transcripts, live stream's not so good for transcripting, but it does the job. So that's fine, Jen. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I like that. Okay, so can you check, Jen, to see if all 1A, B, C, D are kind of wrapped up? Because if everybody's okay with where we're at with that, we'll move to the next one.
It looks to me like it is. I think that I've taken notes. The last one had high agreement for importance and agreement for completing focus groups and interviews with people with lived experience, with some notes in here. So it looks to me like it is. Laura and Danny, what are your thoughts?
I'm fine with moving on if everyone else is in agreement.
Okay. I will also make a note that I put in chat the PDF document that has the very much the details underneath these sub items as well. So I can't share both screens at the same time, but you might want to pull that up as you're going through these.
Yeah, it's really helping me stay together with the concept of all the items. So
Danny, do you want to take us through recommendation 2?
I sure can. So in recommendation 2, this system is around expanding regional capacity for care navigation by building the complex transition team pilot in 3 regions supporting children and adults across the lifespan. So subsection A is finding ways to help DHS and counties in regions to work closely together to facilitate effective transitions in local communities for children and adults using 3 pilot regions. This was one in green, which had a high priority for the surveys that were completed by the council. Are there any further recommendations or further comments on this section or this subsection? I see Janelle has her hand up.
Yeah, so my only question is if 3 pilots is a bit much. I don't know what the basis.
We lost Janelle.
I think we lost audio.
If I may, I think this is Amy. I think we're speaking more so to utilizing the 3 existing regions rather than 3 separate pilots. Janelle, did I answer the right question?
And hey, y'all, this is Natasha. Can you hear me?
yes.
Great. And I know we lost Janelle's last comment, so hopefully this addresses it. But if not, please, again, correct me or add. I think to Amy's point, we have these 3 regions that have been established using some federal grant money. And so I'm not sure that 3 regions is actually enough to get statewide coverage, but it's sort of, what we have today. And so my sense, or the way I'm thinking about this, is assuming we establish an ongoing advisory council, quarterly meetings or whatever we talked about with the first one. I think, that would make, so we have this kind of group that the regions are reporting up to, and that also then that leadership council or that statewide leadership council can make recommendations, say, hey, it looks like we need 4 regions or we need different types of regions. So I would look at the kind of the continuation of the 3 regions that exist today as a place to start to kind of make sure and check proof of concept that having a regional approach and having those regions report data and policy recommendations up to that statewide advisory team, like making sure that that all makes sense and is operating as we think it ought to, and then taking a look at what other type of a regional organization might make sense in the future now that we kind of know how 3 regions work. So that's how I'm thinking about it, that these regions aren't necessarily the final regions, they aren't the final number or organization, but it's something that we can continue doing and gathering data on, and then having a place or a forum or a venue like the statewide leadership team to report data, information, and recommendations, and then determine kind of what to do with those at that leadership advisory council level is what makes sense to me.
That's helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so even Rachel and others, if you think I'm on something here, but like even taking out the word pilot, even if it's the existing regions or something like that, so that it's not like creating something new, it's just building upon stuff.
Yeah, pilot's a little bit of a trigger, I think.
Is there any other comments on subsection A? I don't see anybody else's hand up. Okay. Jen, are you ready to move to the next one?
I am.
Okay.
Let me do this. Let me do something here to make this not split on pages. How's that?
All right. So subsection B, underneath that same category of building on the complex transition teams in the 3 regions supporting children and adults across the lifespan, is regional teams continue adapting the process, tools, and systems used by the complex transition team to assess the effectiveness of transitions across the 3 regions.
And this one had some variability. Comments are around it's needed, and that it sounds like making sure that we have a consistency at the statewide level. And I think that is addressed a little bit later in this chunk, where it says that there's kind of the idea of funding that state level. So, and again, this is part of my understanding, the complex transition team has the sort of state level, but then also has the regions. And so I think it's just, this might be more of a making sure it's written correctly kind of thing. Just based on looking at the data. Jen, is that kind of your sense of that one?
For this 2B, I'm interpreting that input, and so whoever provided it can share their thoughts on that. And this is, maybe I'm coming into it with the focus group idea as well, that while there might be kind of regional capacity and regional expertise and regional resources, that a lot of people will travel around the state. So there needs to be, consistency in practices and policies that span more broader in Minnesota. I think that's what I was reading into that I could be wrong.
I see Janelle has her hand up.
Yeah, when I look at this, the regional teams continue adapting the process, tools, and systems used by the complex transition teams. My question is, does the complex transition team feel like they have all the tools and resources that they need? Because if not, I would add in there that's evaluated and then they can continue to push that forward. Because the way it reads, it looks like they have everything they need. They just need to continue to push it out across the 3 regions. So that would be my only add there.
Amy?
Janelle, I think you might be accurate. I don't think we necessarily have everything we need. It's very much in its infancy, and we do need time to complete that plan, study, do, act, and that cycle to keep it.
Yes, amen. Yep.
Can I just say, this might be a wordsmithing. There's a section that says to fund data collection, to pilot summary of data across the 3 regions. So maybe this section needs to be rewritten to kind of emphasize what you're talking about, Janelle.
I think that data is one of the pieces that is probably a part of this, but I don't necessarily know if it's all of it. So I wouldn't throw all the rings into the hat of the fact is they just need a data system. I think that they need to evaluate what tools that team needs to be able to successfully build a system and have some level of oversight of it within the regions. I feel like there needs to be an opportunity for that team to get the tools that they need before we expect them to roll this out. So I just recommend that we give them a time to evaluate and that they're provided the proper resources needed to do this really challenging, important work.
So if I were to change 2E to expand it to what you're talking about, Janelle, so right now it just says fund data collection in part because I think we need to do a better job of, I talking to Amy, I know that you have some pieces, but maybe not other pieces. So that idea of rewriting this so it says fund based on the, assessment of the complex transitions team and what they need.
What item is that, Rachel?
It was on 2E, which says fund data collection. So that's not, it's not comprehensive in the way that Janelle has just articulated. So I can rewrite that section based on this transcript and build in that, it'd be under 2E, if that's okay with Janelle. It could be that it needs to be up at the top, because it is one of the key issues with this particular recommendation. So I could move it up too, in the list.
You can make that decision, right? I'm not gonna, that's not something that I need to weigh in on, as long as the information's there, where you put it, that you can just decide that.
Excellent. Okay.
I see
right.
Brad has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm not sure where to have this conversation, but I wanted to just bring up here, since we're into 2, somewhere in the report, I think there was consensus on this early on. We had a conversation about the 3 regions, North, Middle, South. And I think there was consensus that that's what we have funding for now. That's what DHS is gearing up to work on, and we all want to support that. But the whole goal is to transition people closer to, for lack of a better description, their home or their permanent place or whatever, and that the regions may need to be smaller in the future. And so I don't want the report, from my standpoint, I don't want the report to misconvey that the 3 regions are the answer to the question, and that's the permanent solution to the problem. I frankly think it would be helpful to get into even smaller regions, but this is what we have money for. And I think that's why we started using the pilot language a little bit. And then when we learned and started to hear more about the complex transition teams, I think the reason that pilot carried into that is what a complex transition team does in the North region might be different, and they might shape it differently or handle it differently than what happens in the middle region or in the southern region of the state. And they need to have the freedom and dexterity to do those things. And then from those approaches, you know, we may learn best practices, or we may learn better ways to do things, or better ways to collaborate. And so I don't know if that's helpful to the conversation or not, but I think as we are envisioning something entirely anew, I want to give DHS the ability to be a partner with the counties and the hospitals and the institutions that exist in various regions, so that we can all find better solutions to these problems that will work in those regions.
Yeah, Brad, I know it's in the report itself, but I'm not seeing it transferring into the recommendation. So maybe the edit needs to be just making that clear, that, and again, taking out the pilot word and saying using 3 regions as initial starting point. So just making sure it's directly in the recommendations.
My wife is in the 133rd Airlift Wing, and they have a program called Strong Bonds. And I think what we're looking for is strong bonds that can be built in various different regions.
Natasha put something in the chat. If somebody that has a better chat view than me wants to read it, that might be helpful to this discussion.
I could do that, Laura. She says the benefits of having a statewide advisory council is that the complex transition teams have a place to bring their findings or recommendations, resource gaps to the council based on the plan, do, study, act, evaluation cycle. Also flagging the DHS will need administrative resources to keep the council staffed and connected with the regional coordinators on a complex transition team. And also, she says she agrees with Brad about the potential need for more or different regions as we move forward, not to get locked into the current 3 regions.
I see Josh has his hand up.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to agree with what both Brad and Natasha commented on there too. And I think, you know, my big point would be, I absolutely agree. There needs to be more than 3. Doesn't need to be 5, doesn't need to be 7, doesn't need to be 10, whatever. And I think utilizing these 3 preliminary regions as our existing, here's what we're learning from, here's what we're going to build upon, and whatever. So making sure that that is clear, that I don't think 3 is the ultimate end all goal, but what that is, I don't really know. And then really in one of the comments, I don't remember if that was mine, but it's certainly what I was thinking, is that there definitely needs to be that dexterity and flexibility within the regions, but there also needs to be that standard, consistent policies, practices, expectations, whatever, that are across all of the regions as a statewide thing. And then that variability, obviously, that are within the regions, the population serves, the providers within those regions, just the different dynamics of variability that we're going to see to allow for that flexibility, but having some set of standards. And that's maybe where too that statewide advisory council, or that broader team can make sure that those are being held to, allowing for some of that regional variance that's to be expected and needed.
Any other comments on that particular section? Then do you want to let me know when you're done taking notes and you're ready to move on?
Yeah, sorry, I'm having a font issue here. So
Oh no, that's quite all right. Are you
All right.
ready?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, all right. So again, under section 2, building on the complex transition team in 3 regions, supporting children and adults across the lifespan, we have subsection C, which is working with the complex transition teams to establish a database decision-making system for improving access to data about individual transitions from hospitals across the 3 region areas of the state. And then the comment section, there is a comment about also including transitions from jails and maybe even like juvenile detention centers.
My thought on this one, it was something that I wanted to ask, but I didn't know how to word. Would this subsection include like that piece of like the case management and address, that changing of like their caseworkers across settings and things like that? Would this data-based decision-making tree address that piece? To avoid like turnover of these decision makers. If that makes sense for our complex transition patients.
Yeah, I think what you're speaking to, Laura, is that, the group has talked about making sure that there's agreements across sectors within or divisions within DHS so that we can be sharing data more effectively, and that the complex transitions team is that place where that coordination happens. But I think you're also speaking to like maybe having that point of leadership of supporting people who need more complex transitions and having somebody make sure that that is monitored for successful transition. Is that what you're speaking to?
Yes, but also it says that decision-making piece. And so like, again, who is that decision maker?
Yeah, I assumed, and again, I'd throw it over to Amy, but the complex transitions team wanted to share data with us, and she was talking about the need to get a better kind of system set up for decision making. And then we also have at the regional level the things that you're all talking about with respect to creating those tailored things. And then the third piece is kind of pathways around particular groups of people and experiences, and making sure that we have like that system that Jessica was talking about, which is a way to zero in and really help support, autistic children who have certain types of issues going on versus maybe somebody with a substance abuse disorder and diabetes, or, those different types of things that are causing those challenges. And I think that that's a really important piece of this, and maybe we don't have it written quite right yet.
And Brad did comment in the chat too about maybe evidence-based is more accurate than data-based in this item.
Laura, did we speak to what your question was?
I think so.
Well, I think to me, this area too is where we get into just the data sharing side of things, and how do we make sure that the system can talk with each other? All the gazillion different levels of the system can talk with each other, and can the counties or the regions or the providers or the just the hospitals within the regions, within the whatever subsections, how do we make sure that the system actually has the capability to do what we need it to do to get this information timely and effectively and within all the HIPAA and privacy and all the requirements that are going to need to fall in this area? That's a huge thing. And we need that information to be flowing well to actually do what we need to do to collect the data, to help the individuals that are stuck in the hospitals, to help the folks that are helping the individuals stuck in the hospitals get the information to the right people, providers, whatever that need to get it. So I'm guessing that's what this really starts to focus on too.
I see Brad has his hand raised.
I'm gonna jump in here just because, and you may see some comments in the fields where I've alluded to this a little bit before, but this is something I've been harping on for some time, so I'm gonna jump in. One of the things that we can make as a recommendation is to improve the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act to allow for the continued protection of private and non-public data, but the sharing of data among stakeholders who need to solve these problems. There are examples and models for this. For example, if a child protection investigation is open, law enforcement and child protection social workers can share data among each other, and it's still protected to the extent that each source information is protected. But the problem in the child protection world is once the investigation is declared to be complete, the ability to data share ends, and then you run into a real weird thing that happens, which is that kid is in placement and there are ongoing issues that dovetail with the criminal justice system, and you almost have to reopen an investigation to be allowed to share data again. That is a barrier to solving problems. And so in some way, shape, or form, I would love it if we had a hard recommendation that the legislature needs to work with DHS and the stakeholders to fix this part of the Government Data Practices Act to protect data, but allow it to be shared. Thank you.
To me, it seems like what you're saying, Brad, is that we need to, because it is a long-term, that's clearly a long-term goal, but having it documented in the short term as something that we're working towards, we could certainly put that in. And I think that's a really great, and what I'm hearing from you is use existing strategies and address the barriers known with those types of strategies to create a way in which we can share data more effectively. And then I'll just take the stuff from the transcript that you said and just, build it in.
Thank you.
I see Jody has her hand raised.
I do. Thank you. So I would just piggyback on that. I think that's an excellent point that I don't think has been brought forward at this point in time. So from a county perspective, when we have a person that we're working with who, is in a hospital setting or an emergency room, definitely getting releases signed it's a barrier. It's a barrier to processing timely, referrals to providers. And I think this is a really actionable step, that could be taken to really address and alleviate the problem across, many different perspectives. Jessica, you mentioned earlier, there's so many strands involved here, so many players at the table, but I think that that is something that would really have an immediate impact on being able to more efficiently make referrals to alleviate some of the emergency admissions and hospital admissions. So thank you. Great suggestion, Brad, from my perspective anyways.
Yeah, and I guess I just add in a quick comment too. I mean, at the State of Reform conference last week, or the week before, whenever that was, I can't remember who it was. I think it was somebody from Hennepin Health made a similar comment in one of the presentations of, a lot of the folks that are, stuck in the hospitals right now have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different case managers and different folks supporting them along the way, and not being able to even share the information with everybody that's involved in it, and there isn't a streamlined case management process, which then maybe could get to some of that. You have that point person with, the ability to share the information with the appropriate parties and stakeholders within and outside of the healthcare system or within the hospital to be able to get them out. And really, probably so much driven by the fact that all of this information is so protected and bifurcated and in silos that you can't get it to anybody timely or effectively at all. And it's just incredibly frustrating. And yeah.
And I, as a parent of a child, I can speak to that directly from a guardian perspective that has caused delays and like duplicate assessments and other frustrations. We've been lucky enough to have people work with us, so it's not as much of a burden on us ourselves, but it's still a lot for those people assisting us.
I'm going to interject just with some housekeeping items. We have 12 minutes until a break. And there are 16 more items to go through on the recommendations. So I'm just sharing that with you for helping kind of think through how to go through the rest. I'm not sure if from a facilitator perspective and looking at the timeline, I'm wondering if the council would want to address the items with a little bit more variability and then go back to the green, or if you want to keep going through each individually.
Would it be appropriate to take the subsections as one lump sum and of each recommendation and then let people interject on which portion they have a comment on, because they do kind of dovetail into each other?
Yeah, I think that's one approach.
I kind of think if we did that, we'd have to go a little bit slower so that Jen could take good notes.
Well, we're being recorded too, so we, you know,
Okay.
we can follow the conversation and always go back and look at the transcript or look at the YouTube live stream. And so don't let my note taking interfere. I don't want my note taking to be disruptive. So maybe what I'll do is take notes on this side. And that way you all can do what you need to do.
Okay.
Conversation goes. Okay.
I
So
mean, we could wrap up number 2 and just look at, using Laura's strategy, are there any leftover kind of discrepancies that we need to finalize? Because I do agree, Laura, sometimes this is a unified discussion, but then we got to make sure that we hit those items that are maybe more, variable. So I think the question is, how far have we gotten through number 2? And let's kind of see if we can, because it's one of the longer ones, I think.
Mm-hmm.
there are 2 left in number 2.
Okay, and so 2D is map out data collection systems collected by regional teams to capture data. And then, so it seems like we've talked about and we've captured it in the transcripts, so I can work on that. But then this last one is, what is it? Who is it? Laura, you're talking through this one.
Danny was, but
Yeah.
Oh, Danny was, sorry.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So this one's about capacity building, mentoring, and supports for regional teams to learn to use data and make changes, regularly reviewing the system.
I think that kind of speak to what you all were talking about earlier too, is that we're wanting to make sure that this is driven by what the complex transition team needs for data. And so the comment is, yes, if this is meaning to build consistency and replicable practices and procedures, I understand. I don't know if that person was also one of the people that, scored it as a lower priority. So I think the key thing is, do you all feel like this one is okay? Does it need to be wordsmithed to make it a little bit more effective?
This is Janelle. My question is it needed?
It's a good question.
I wonder if it isn't, if we're taking into account the other comments and suggestions we've made for the other variables.
It might be that, like, I can't remember exactly some of the discussions going on, but one of the things that we've talked about is making sure that however the system gets built, so that the complex transition team has data, that the online systems, that they have the support they need to utilize it effectively. So if you're going to invest in funding to set up a dashboard or some sort of system internally, that there's some funding behind it to support the use. So that, I think that was the intention.
Hey, this is Jessica, and I hadn't put this in as a comment, but just in response to the discussion, I do think to have, data systems obviously take time, and they're going to be whatever's on that dashboard is going to be as good as whatever was collected to put into it. So I don't know exactly how that looks, but I do think there needs to be resources to be able to do a good job of that.
Is it an option to add resources then to this? Because this just talks about reviewing it regularly.
Yeah,
I think,
certainly. So maybe what we're talking about is fund, write it more like what we're talking about so that it's clear that it's funds necessary to support the data systems, technology, and infrastructure, something like that.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, subsection E is to fund all of the other subsections.
Well, I think it was more, and it did have that capacity building piece to it, but like my memory is that it got created as a way to say, we need to have funds that help support how the data are represented within a technology-based system, and make sure that people have the support they need to use the data system and the dashboard. And like Jessica just said, it's only as good as the data you put in it. So, operational definitions for key things. It kind of it speaks to that unified effort at really being clear about what the information is or the evidence that you're speaking to. I do think based on our conversation, I could give this a shot at, changing it around. And then if it's not quite right yet, we could be doing things back and forth between the 30th to kind of get it sorted out.
That sounds good. I'm wondering, to promote good discussion and time consideration, would we want to consider taking a break now before we start the recommendation 3 discussion?
Sure.
And then we can move into the rest when we return?
Yep, that makes sense. Just to put up the timeline again. You have the open session immediately after the break. That starts at 10:55.
And then we can resume our recommendation discussion after open session?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I like that. Josh?
Sounds good to me.
All right. So will we return then at 10:52? Or do we want to return at 10:50?
I think I think 10:52 or 10:53 is fine, just a minute or two before the open session.
Okay.
Makes sense.
All right. Have a good break, guys.
All right, assuming folks are getting back in, is it okay, Jen and team to get this started again?
Sure is.
Yep.
And you were on mute.
If we're ready on our end.
Okay, cool. So we'll come back here, and then this is the time in the agenda for the open session and the opportunity for public comment. Not seeing anybody in the room right now to provide any public comment here. Just a reminder for those live streaming and anybody else that might watch this afterwards to submit those comments to that email address, the transitionsadvisorycouncil.dhs@state.mn.us. And those will be shared with each of the council members like they were in the previous packet. We did receive a handful, quite a few comments sent in via email from a lot of home care providers. So thank you to Kathy Mesterly and the Minnesota Home Care Association and the members for providing comment and feedback that way. I don't know if there was any questions or comments that any council members had on any of those or anything else we wanted to add at this point. And Stacy just noted that nothing else has come into via email so far during the meeting today. So hearing none and assuming Mr. Pollack doesn't want to add any public comment at this time, we can move back to the discussion on the recommendations.
I'm going to share my screen again for you all. Am I sharing? There we go. And I was just taking a look at the time and the process that you've gone through so far. I have a recommendation to put forth for you to consider, and that is perhaps to move to 4 because that is the domain with the most variability, and then move back to 3 and 5. I see, Laura, your head nod, if that works for.
Yeah, that'll just make sure that we get the time to deal with this more complex, kind of a lot more differences in opinions. So.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. So if it's okay with everyone, I will read recommendation 4 and the subsections, and then people are free to comment on whichever one they feel the need to. So recommendation 4 is to actively integrate measurement and action plans related to addressing geographic, racial, and ethnic disparities in acute care transitions, and coordinate with existing state health equity processes. Subsection A is to coordinate with existing systems and processes to integrate acute care issues into existing efforts to address disparities rather than creating another meeting process. And subsection B is to actively integrate measurement and action planning into regional systems and measurement related to monitoring disparities. Subsection C is to dedicate funds for regions to reach out and recruit diverse members to participate in regional process. And then subsection D is to fund pilot systems for technology-based information sharing and care navigation. And it looks like there's also subsection E, which requires regions to report on equity and diversity within region and how regions are I think that should say increasing active voice and leadership as part of measurement system. And then subsection F is work with other areas of state to support efforts to listen and support diverse communities, including geographic, gender affirming, ethnicity, race, and other individuals with a history of marginalization.
And Jen, do you want to just hit the summary of the diversity, which is mostly in the priority area?
Sure. I'm also trying to make this on one page.
Sorry, I didn't mean to give you 2 jobs.
That's okay. I can multitask sometimes. Yeah, so this is the domain that had the greatest amount of variability in priority, and additional areas of feedback. So this domain stood out as one that was likely worth having conversation around, and addressing the variability to determine how the council wants to move forward with addressing these recommendations that tap into one of the 3 priorities for the council.
I mean, so Laura, it might be good just to go through the items, since most of the items do have discrepancies, just as a starting point, so we can get a sense of, are there ways that we can restructure this, or what are the major concerns, that sort of thing.
And as far as like taking it one subsection at a time, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, starting with 4A, which has quite a bit of variability.
Okay.
And just kind of do what you were doing before.
Okay. Any recommendations or comments on 4A?
And just as a background, in the last meeting, people didn't feel like we should have a set aside kind of council or group or advisory process, that instead that we should try to work within the existing systems. So that's kind of why it was written that way, is my interpretation of what you were kind of recommending. And it does say this is worded awkwardly. So if there's a way to articulate, better articulate what you all were kind of trying to tell me, I'll do a better job of kind of reflecting it back.
I wonder if a better way to articulate is to like ensure a diverse representation within existing, if that makes sense.
Are you editing a sentence?
For the recommendation A.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we could word it to like ensure diverse representation.
Are you thinking on
the systems?
On this council, or the future work of this council, or
well, I think,
I mean, we're not responsible for the other groups, but we still want to do what you're saying, which is really good.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No, I think
I didn't realize that we weren't. I just like the wording of providing pathways or ensuring diverse representation within the existing systems.
I see. Okay.
No, and this is Josh. And I think where I didn't rate a lot of these ones as higher, or whatever, or more in that medium range of importance, was because this, I think, gets built into the longer term stuff. So in my brain too, I naturally defaulted to the higher priority ones need to be those that we need to more quickly act upon, that we have more information to be able to provide some solutions or recommendations on. So it's not necessarily, why I would have rated many of these as more of the medium importance, but these are more of the long-term things that don't have as much of an immediate impact to get the folks that are stuck in the hospitals out right now and get the system flowing right now or as quickly as possible. So that's maybe some rationale or context related to maybe how I was thinking with some of these too.
That's really helpful. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I see Janelle has her hand raised.
Yeah. I guess I just feel like ensuring that we address complex racial and ethical disparities really should be included in all of the things that we're doing. I So it says actively integrate measurement and action plans related to. I just, when we're doing when we're doing our work, these things need to be ensured that they are considered to ensure we are having a sense of equity, right? Across all of our processes. So for me, it's ensuring everyone doing this work, right, is keeping that at the forefront of their processes. So I don't necessarily think that it's an additional step. It should be part of the process.
Great. So, I mean, it sounds to me like you're saying, Janelle, it's not so much the items, it's the fact that we need to be integrating across the earlier things that we're talking about, right? And that,
yes.
Yeah, and I totally get that. I think somehow we have to, because this is the third bullet in the requests, we've got to figure out a way to address this in the way that, Josh, you're talking about as a short term that kind of speaks to what you're saying, Janelle, I think.
Jessica?
Yeah, I did rate this one as a high priority, but I didn't put in any comments about it, so I could just add a few comments about why I think it's a high priority. I mean, obviously it's part of what we've been kind of, tasked with providing recommendations on. And I was one of the ones last time who said, I don't think there should be like a separate council that meets about it, because it should be embedded into, what we're doing. But I do like having specific recommendations, because I think if it becomes too diffuse and it's kind of tacked on to each and every recommendation, it might not get the critical focus that it should have. We already know from the data we have seen in this council that there's some overrepresentation from different racial and ethnic groups, and so ensuring that we're kind of, I know I'm looking at some of the sub bullets in here, having disaggregated data, so we're understanding if that is improving or not, or where there's gaps, and then the representation. I do find it really important that those are specifically called out, so they just don't kind of become an afterthought. So I just thought I'd mention that, since I hadn't put in comments in the survey. I just kind of rated it.
I'm noticing in the responses from people that filled out the survey that there was one dissenting opinion, and I'm just wondering if the dissenting opinion was like related to the recommendation itself, or maybe how it was formatted. If anyone wanted to speak to that.
And I'm Laura, I just want to, as the person who completed this summary here, when you say dissenting opinion, is that the one in the?
Yeah, because it says not in support.
Well, it's not. So the one in that, so in the blue, the 7 would be the yeses, the 0 would be the no's, and the 1 is an additional comment. So it's not a dissenting opinion. It's just, it was the comment was, this recommendation is worded awkwardly, in my opinion, not sure what this means. So I couldn't, as somebody reviewing that, put that in a yes or a no bucket. So that fell into just kind of an additional comment bucket.
Thanks, that's my mistake.
No problem.
So no, it's very good to talk about this. I think what I'm hearing from the group so far is that we need to reorganize the content so that it's more directly related to the regional systems, and that it has that more short-term feel to it, with the idea that, again, there may be some long-term sort of things that we point to, but they arrive or evolve out of the regional process. So for example, it says require regions to report on equity. It could be a section of the reporting process within regional systems, and just name whatever as a to whatever. you know, that it has a section on equity and diversity or health equity and diversity or something like that. So I could go through if that would help clarify this. I mean, I think another question maybe for Amy would be like from the complex transitions team. I know you all are working on ways to reach out to other areas, division sectors of the state, and maybe that could be something that we somehow build into A, for instance, that it's something that you all are working on.
Yeah, baking it into the process as it develops. I hear you. Yes.
This is Janelle. I'm wondering if where we need to put this is to ensure that within our new data systems that these things are being captured so that we can properly assess and allocate the resources as needed. So that's the one actionable step that I think could be concrete to ensure we have, you know, that the accurate data to make some decisions. So I think for me, this is about ensuring that our data system captures these things so that we can take, so we have the data necessary for decision making.
Oh, Brad has a comment. Does somebody want to read it? Or Brad, do you want to read it?
I can read it if that's helpful, Rachel.
I can do it since I put it in. I just didn't want to interrupt the conversation and the flow. You know, as I was listening to people, I think we all agree that it's a shared responsibility of the state of Minnesota, local governments, hospitals, and other institutions caring for people to eliminate bias, discrimination, and disparities when transitioning people in need of acute care. So for the sake of eliminating barriers, the DHS complex transition teams should identify and track obstacles and outcomes for individuals in identified protective classes and other vulnerable and underrepresented groups. I like leaving it with, this is part of, I think, what Jeff was getting at earlier. This is one of those things that across the state of Minnesota, we want to set a certain standard. And leaving it with the DHS complex transitions teams on what is it you are identifying as barriers and what do we need to track, giving them that dexterity to do it, but knowing what the thing is that we're wanting to make consistent across the state of Minnesota. And I think Janelle really hit it on the head. Let's capture that data so it can be used for good decision making. So just a couple of thoughts.
I'm wondering, kind of piggybacking on Janelle's statement and then also Brad's, would it be something that we would want to have our specific recommendation for that piece in section 4, but like a superseding wording of what Brad just said, kind of prefacing our recommendations? So to keep that in the forefront as we're going down the line in the report.
So Laura, are you saying, I'm thinking visually, putting that as a header for section 4, or putting Brad's comment up here at the top of all recommendations, like this is the guiding philosophy?
Yep, the top. That way we don't have to like specifically put it in the other recommendations, but we are putting it in the forefront, like that it's implied that this is a priority for all of these steps. And then subsection 4 can directly address, or recommendation 4 can directly address the methods of obtaining that, if that makes sense. Because that seems to me that is what recommendation 4 is speaking to, is the methods of obtaining that representation for diverse communities and underrepresented populations.
There's a comment in chat supporting that idea from Janelle Hubbard.
I think I have it somewhere in here, but I feel like what you're saying too, Laura, is that, you know, if we're continuing to recommend that this group proceed forward in some sort of way, that it do so with more representation of diverse voices as well. And I'm not sure if that's in the recommendations yet. I'm looking. So that would be something that I'm hearing from you. So example for F, work with other areas of the state to support listening sessions and things like that. I mean, maybe what we need to do is directly reference the, you know, the recommendation that this oversight system proceed forward and that there be that diverse representation. I'm just not sure if it's in these recommendations yet. I know you mentioned them, so that it should be, but I'm
Bit earlier.
Yeah, it might be.
Oh, I'm sorry, Brad. I'm talking over you.
What'd you say, Brad?
It was in there somewhere.
I know, right? It's in there somewhere. I think what that I need to do is bring it down there following your logic of, you know, this is the way in which we achieve all of the items being addressed from a geographic, ethnic, race, sort of equity lens.
I think if you go up to the page above, it was up. I think it was up there. Oop, little far.
Oh, sorry, Brad.
You don't have to do it. I'll look for it, you guys.
I think it's somewhere earlier where it could be.
It might be in the it might be in the statewide section.
Mm-hmm.
Can you scroll down a little bit? Keep going. We got to get down to 4.
Oh yeah. Oh, you wanted me at the top of 4. Gotcha.
Yeah. Keep going. If you can.
Pilots require regions.
Dedicate funds for regions to reach out and recruit diverse members to participate in regional process.
Yeah, so that's at the regional level, but I don't think I said this council if this council continues. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yep. Got it.
The part, if that's okay, it's I've heard you all say it.
Well, and that should be a priority for any of the oversight and within
that's what you're speaking to, Laura. I like that. I like the way you frame that, like having that could be a part of the executive summary as well. And it just sets the stage for the recommendations and that it works well with the data because the data sources are all pointing to the need to focus on this. So it works really well. All right. Well, it seems like I can take the transcript and reorganize this based on what you've said. Is there anything else that we need to hit on item 4? Do we feel like we've gotten the major elements addressed? I feel good about it. I feel like I can rewrite this in a way that works for you all. As long as there's not anything missing that we haven't talked about.
I'm gonna try to make it smaller to balcony view it so you all can see as many as possible at a time.
This looks really small now.
Now you can't read it, right? So give and take.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I appreciate the data though. Thank you, Jen, for doing this.
No problem. I can
All
only
right, so
of it up. So
do you want to take us to another one of our missing numbers that we haven't hit? Was it 3? We've done 1 and 2 and 4, right?
I'm gonna try to get 3 on one page. Pardon me.
Danny, do you want to take number 3?
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
If it's big enough for me to read it. Otherwise, I think I've got it in a different format. I can read it.
Make it larger, Danny.
So number 3 is about establishing overall infrastructure and statewide oversight to share data and monitor regional teams while also leveraging existing resources dedicated to addressing barriers to acute care transitions. Looks like two of those underneath that header are high priorities. The one that's not is using implementation science strategies to oversee and monitor regional teams, allowing regions freedoms to tailor actions while unifying data measures and reporting systems. Also in that section, we're talking about working with existing groups, engaging in evaluation to establish and unify measure systems and collect data beyond immediate hospital discharge, using systems already created when possible, and acquiring additional funds dedicated to positive supports and address acute care.
Amy?
I'm hoping that the council can help clarify a little bit, because the way I read this with my compliance brain is, are you looking for an oversight and compliance role that the council maintains? Or is it more so in an advisory capacity where we can develop a structure kind of with that bi-directional sharing of information? So that's a broad question to the group, the council, to make sure I have my understanding correct of what you're doing.
I don't think without specific delegation of authority by the legislature that we can be anything more than advisory.
Mm-hmm.
That's helpful. I apologize for splitting hairs, but knowing, you know, in my role of oversight of supervising that specific group, I want to make sure I understand.
Yeah, and Amy, I'll jump in and say, just from the person that has been grinding my way through transcripts and stuff, that I think the discussion has been about how to use the existing infrastructure, and you all already have something in place where you oversee the three regional groups. This is meant to, a lot of our council members said there's got to be a point to a leadership kind of piece where somebody is looking at the different patterns across the region and coming up with kind of that big picture, so that, like, the example being the person who has been across the state in all of these different transitions in all these different hospitals with different psychiatrists. If there is a oversight team that could actually identify, like you're already doing, you know, the pathway that somebody's taking, then, like, the participants in the focus groups are saying, we can actually get more preventative and not just focus on transitions because this person has already been to a number of different places. So I think it was meant to be, not necessarily, and I know you're smarter about this than me as far as how the state infrastructure gets set up, but it's meant to be that coordination of the regional groups, which I feel like you have already.
Janelle? I see Janelle has her hand raised.
Yeah, would there be a benefit of the regions doing a reporting requirement back to DHS based, you know, and it could actually be just fed out of this data system, right? That would allow that evaluation to occur, right? So I would think that we would be able to use the tools that are currently in place, because you're gonna want to make decisions based on facts, and while a team can come together, they really need to have facts to be able to do that. So just wondering if when you're building that data system, if there's a way to capture data by region that can help inform those decisions.
Do you want me to take a run at that one?
Sorry.
Yes, I agree. We do need to have adequate supports to ensure we can splice the data accordingly to make those assumptions of what we're seeing.
I have a question about subsection C, as far as, like, the funding. it says positive supports and acute care, but it seems like the rest of the recommendation is more towards like the data like the data piece and systems piece, and not necessarily like, I feel like recommendation 5 is geared more towards the actual direct positive supports. And is that correct? Like, I'm just wondering, like, is there a different goal to that subsection?
Yeah, and I might need to lean on Stacy on this one. I remember going through some of these, and this one in particular, we changed to acquire additional funds dedicated positive supports, because it was meant to help make sure that we had the training systems in place for DSPs and PCA. So I know Tavan is here, and I know Laura, you mentioned those things too. So kind of that was one of the pieces I think that is meant to kind of create that way to be able to access some of these core positive supports that our groups are asking for in the focus groups and interviews. I know some of you on the council have talked about it. So anyway, that's what that is, Laura. It's meant to kind of like, people in our interviews are saying we can't get access to people who can supervise folks to create analysts for the qualification of, to use positive supports, things like that. And so this was meant to have this piece. And then the other thing that was added into this document was the idea of having some funds available. And we'll be talking about that in a little bit, but having funds that providers could utilize to offset whatever it is that they need to provide support to complex transitions, such that if a regional team had a pocket of money that would allow them to have an RFP process or some sort of way in which a provider can say, I really need these funds for property destruction sort of related issues, or to have a dedicated one-on-one home because financially that's going to be difficult to pull off. So this is meant to be a partner to that, which is, first we have to make it available to people so that they can actually do things like positive behavior support to support the transition, because we're hearing that people don't have the ability to support folks and then they end up back in the hospital.
So I'm just kind of curious if this subsection C either needs to be worded differently to fit more with recommendation 3 to bridge to that other partnership, or if it would be better suited in recommendation 5 is my question.
Yeah, it was placed here because it's a state level issue of implementation science. So I don't know. I'm fine putting it wherever you all think it needs to go, or taking it out, or.
See Devana's hand raised, and then Amy.
Can you guys hear me?
Not
You're
too
quiet.
well. You maybe turn up the. No, can't hear you at all now. We almost heard you before. And if you have trouble, Tavana, you could put it in the chat as well. I'm sorry you're having trouble. Frustrating.
As she's doing that, do we want to jump to Amy quick?
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I'm wondering if perhaps we could open this up a little bit, because I think this is perhaps an iteration or an evolution of earlier ideas, is additional funds, perhaps looking at it in a way of flexible funds that could be dedicated to supporting acute care transitions, such as positive supports, additional items that are not covered by another payer source, like, for example, excessive damage or environmental modifications that are needed to support a person that are above what perhaps a waiver might cover. So again, flexible funds that could be utilized to support complex or acute care transitions,
Oh,
where
Amy,
other sources might cover it.
I mean, I think we need to look at, Jen, if you could take us down to, let me see which number it is, because we do have that. Amy, this is like a separate issue that was, somebody asked that this get added in. I don't.
Okay, so it is an evolution.
Well,
Apologies.
Tavana's trying to speak to it. So Tavana and others have talked about the need for training for DSPs, et cetera. But then there's this other piece that you're speaking to, which is built in. So I think that's what we all need to decide. And so I'm looking to see where it is. It's, let's see, it's in 5 somewhere. Build incentives for providers with complex transition team regions, so that there's funds available for providers in pilot regions to access fiscal incentives. So it might be for training, it might be for property destruction, it might be for, other types of things. So I think, Amy, that's in this section. And so the question becomes, do they need to be in both places? I believe that there were people advocating that it goes there so that there can be funds to address providers who are saying, we can't even get information about some of these positive supports. We can't do this. So if we can have some funds to actually make those things easily available and have ways to do that. And then the 5A is meant to be like, okay, for your regional teams, you have this much money, people can access that to maybe offset going to those trainings that are, funded, that I think that was the logic of it, but.
There is flexible, and I don't know the item, but there is something in here regarding flexible funds, I believe, for just what you were talking about, Amy, to use to offset some of the costs associated with supporting more complex needs. I want to do a quick time check. We have 3 minutes until we're supposed to move on to the timeline for finalizing the report and preparing for next meeting. That section has 20 minutes to it. Do you want to run an additional 10 minutes into that section and then leave 10 minutes for planning for the next meeting? And continue.
I support that.
Okay.
Are we in support of that? Yes. I'm wondering in regards to this particular discussion in our chair planning meeting, Josh had brought up, and then I also discussed the hardships on providers when patients go into the hospital, because then they are losing that revenue and or ability to keep the staff in order to welcome them back. Do we want to make a recommendation or add to a recommendation to expand the additional funding that was provided in the 2023 recommendation for having direct care staff be able to be compensated to attend to patients while they're in the hospital? Because I think that legislation, as we discussed, was written more narrowly for only certain supports. So if we wanted to expand that to allow for broader ability to maintain staffing. And also with that rationale would be to facilitate better individualized care and training, because the direct care staff at these community supports outside of the hospital would be actively participating in cares at the hospital and the ability to transition that into care plans in the external environment.
Sorry, I'm putting that here under 5C because this item talks about changing access funds to providers so others can bill while person in the hospital for DHF staffing. Might not fit here exactly, but that's where I put it. I want to also read in relation to 3, and then Jessica and Josh, your hands are up, but Devonna, you typed in her comments related to, I believe, this one here. Can these funds be used to for training and certifying home care workers, and then reward these special certified PCAs with higher wages? And Rachel, am I right in that was?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this, Tavana. I think, because some of this is longer term planning, so being able to actually increase salary is challenging, but there are some ways to do it, Tavana, on particular positive support services. So Brad also put in the chat, like if you've forgotten what that is, positive supports, there's a positive support HCBS home and community-based waiver. It has 3 levels to it, one of which is at the direct support level. And so there's been a group of people working who have a background in positive behavior support, as an example, who've been saying, can we rewrite this so that there is a way for an incentive for staff to learn and become experts over time. So it becomes more of a competency-based training. That's going to take a while. And so one of the suggestions that came from another council member was to create these funds for the region so that if you're within the region and your provider, you can, get some funds to do those kind of things that would help to support your work. Because it's temporary, that would be a problem. But at the same time, it's trying to address the thing, Tavana, that you're talking about, which is we need to be on a long-term basis moving towards what you're talking about. On a short term, can we do some of these things that allow for some incentives for providers to move forward? And so anyway, I know there's some other hands up, so I want to stop talking, but I just wanted to address that particular issue.
Is it okay for me to jump in at this point? So I agree with the need for both, and I just wanted to kind of emphasize what Laura shared from their chair meeting. I don't necessarily think it has to be any recommendation, but I do think it could be specified in some of them because I see them as like slightly different. There's the capacity building regional training of getting, folks able to handle, more complex needs, and positive supports. And then there's also someone's in the hospital. We're recommending things like care, navigation, wraparound care, training of the staff so that they can, maintain their staff and hopefully go back home or to the new people who they'd be working with, they could come in and start to meet the person. So I think having also just specified in one of these and probably that lower one we were in when Laura said it, so that if I'm understanding what you said, Laura, staff would have the ability to bill or get compensated for that time that maybe they're attending weekly check-in meetings or getting trained or in meeting the person, et cetera. So to prepare for the transition, which is, of course, really our whole focus here. So I think that's really important and should be specified, and that both are important, and maybe they kind of just need to be clarified that we want both types of things.
I'll be very quick, knowing we're out of time. The only other piece that I would add to this in relation to direct care staff, PCAs, whatever, the staffing from the community-based organizations that might support individuals being able to go into the hospital, there might be something to that care management, case management thing, so that, somebody's case manager doesn't turn off or lose access when they go into the hospital. If there's something somewhere, whether it's here or somewhere else, to incorporate into a recommendation, even where we're looking at what needs to be fixed, adjusted, tweaked to allow for case managers to just stay with a person up to and through their acute care stay, back out and whatever, because that seems to be such a huge barrier for some of these individuals, not just that their waiver gets turned out, but they just don't have that main point of contact supporting them, once they go into that ED or into that acute care setting, and then it turns back on when they're out. And it's just, there's a disconnect, and we hit the pause button maybe too quickly. So if there's a way to look at that, it might be something that I think could be really beneficial.
I see Cindy's hand raised.
Yes. I wanted to just say to that point, I think that right now the community-based case managers they continue once a patient's in the hospital. I just think we'd have to be really clear and specific about what role they're going to take, because they don't end services, but what often happens is that they I mean, the perception, and it's fair in some ways, is that now their client is in a safe environment. So then it just does not become a priority. So they're still working with that patient. Their services don't end. I think we just have to be specific about that. There is, timelines are very different. And how do we make sure that case manager is staying engaged and really operating at the pace that's required in my lens from the hospital? Because we have, people are in the hospital for 3.5, days if you're on a med surge, 10 to 14 days if you're in mental health. And, we might not get calls back for a week. So it's just that shift. It's not that they're staying involved, but it's just, they really take a back seat, or they disengage and don't have a shared sense of urgency.
I do want to read 2 comments that came in through chat. One was in relation to the earlier conversation about Jessica's comments about building capacity, and then also the allocation of funds that would let staff be involved in different ways. Laura said, to provide direct support in a meaningful way, you need to have a certain skill set, and staff should be recognized, compensated accordingly, as preventative for acute care. And then to the most recent comment by Cindy, Susan Pleasant put in chat, I agree with Cindy. Many of these are about recognizing the hospital is not a safe place. All services should be ramping up to help, not deprioritizing because they are unstable.
I see that Jody's hand is raised.
Hi there. So I would just add some comments about not hearing necessarily back from case managers. I think it's important to bring some awareness as well to caseload sizes. As we're talking about caseloads across county systems, my case managers at this point in time are working with 60 different people. And so it's not necessarily, I guess I just want to challenge the perception that maybe they're stepping away or they're disengaging, because, they are actively working with everyone that they are working with. We are challenged to provide really great services because of the number of people that we're working with. So, and I think that I don't know that there's a huge awareness about what those caseload sizes are and capacity of the county to be able, to address and to be fully present and fully engaged is really limited by the amount of time. Case managers have very, very active, busy schedules. And so they may already be traveling, to different corners of the state that keeps them on the road, or very, busy meeting schedules. And so capacity to respond, I think, is a consideration, and I guess just bringing awareness to that. So.
Yeah. This is Cindy. I agree with that. And just, that's a fair point related to caseload size. I am aware of that. Our caseload is different in the hospital. We have probably an average of 30. So probably half the size, but also just, we also, just in fairness, I would also say I've heard that directly from case managers as well. So I think there's practice variation, as all teams have. But I think it's to the point, again, of that we need a system and a structure that notes that the hospital is not the safest place for this patient. We need to ramp up resources to support them getting back out into the community.
Janelle, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, so I think all the systems that I work with are taxed, right? The capacity is tight. So the hope is like the way I envision this is that this data, this information sharing system, right? I'm hoping will increase efficiency. So if you have a team of people, various disciplines, who are working on one individual, they will have access to be able to see the updates and any information that is new, so that, I mean, the amount of calls that people go round and round and round in trying to seek information, trying to get updates. The hope is that whoever is on this team can log in and see all updates, so that we can free up time for being more person-centered. So, I mean, I don't see the caseload sizes going down, right? So we just got to get smarter and get the resources in there to get these teams the support that they need. And because I believe people are just doing the best they can. And I think focusing on building a system that meets those needs is going to be really important.
I'm gonna type this in here, but there are also two additional comments in the chat. If either Laura or Danny, you wanna take those or just read them for
From Tavana, we have, in the SEIU home care contract, we have access to training that pays a stipend, but most importantly, after completion of these trainings, it gives home care workers access to the enhanced rate. If they have a client that has a rating of EN or higher, or require 10 hours or more of care, those trained workers receive a 7.5% wage increase that functions with their wage scale. This is good for the worker because this training can be used with multiple qualifying clients, so short-term would not be an issue. Could we tie something like this into the existing contract? And then Laura commented, can we expand this to non-union direct support staff or increase union access? So Cindy, is your hand raised because you have something else, or was that just from the last time?
Oh, sorry, no, I'll put it down.
Okay.
I'm gonna take those from the chat and put them somewhere in this document, probably at the top, so we can figure out where to fit them in. I'm just giving you a time check. We are now at 11:47 into the last, minutes of the meeting. So as for Laura.
And just the background, Jen, I think that originally we were going to talk about the timeline for October 2nd versus 31st in this last section, but I do think, we need a little bit of time to wrap up and make sure that we got a good plan.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I feel like we've addressed a lot of the things here. I see Amy's got her hand up, but after Amy's comment, do we feel like we can move on to planning for next meeting?
Yeah.
Amy?
I wanted to just let you know that that our legislative team, commissioner and assistant commissioner, are in support of submitting that report on the extended timeline, so that you guys are aware as you plan going forward.
Excellent. That's great. Thank you, Amy. Thank you for tracking that down for us. That's super helpful because it helps us do this last step. Now we have a little bit more of a understanding, and it sounds like everybody was in favor of kind of moving forward with the later timeline. It really would be good for us. Now, for a just as a recap, and it might be good to put that thing up, Jen, the backward plan, to talk about next steps. We will rewrite these recommendations and send them out again. What we want to do is make sure that we get any feedback and changes from that document in time to come to the 30th with a really good feeling that we've got the recommendations, and we will also send the draft report. I can send it now if you would like. It's got some missing pieces because we don't have the focus group information in yet. And Danny's still doing a few more interviews. If we had a little bit of time to work on the report and get it to you, then we could roll into the 30th with a sense of where we're at. And that gives us some time because the public reporting period is October 17th through the 30th on this timeline. So what we would do is on the 30th, kind of come together, make sure all the recommendations were rewritten in the way that was acceptable to everybody. You will have a chance to go through the report and then, submit to us formatting edits by the October 7th kind of time period. Then we would send you the October 16th, the final report. So it'll be all wrapped up with a nice bow so that it could go to the public comment sort of process. Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to clarify something real quick that would be helpful with the report if the substantial feedback were submitted by September 30th so that all of that could be incorporated into a draft report that was sent to you, that you could vote on the draft, and then any feedback after that is more grammatical and not content.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that, Jen.
I also see Josh's hand raised as well.
Yeah, so just a comment / question / my own personal thing, so not speaking on behalf of anybody here. But one question or comment is, when will we be posting some of these drafts, some of these documents to the website for public digestion? Will there be anything put out before the public comment period, the official one, the 2-week thing in the middle of October? Or is there a way for folks to review, read, provide some feedback via the email, as we've been pushing and really encouraging throughout, but something to respond to and react to? Obviously, they can go on and watch these videos and try to make comments that way, but is there a comfort level of DHS or you guys, Jen and Rachel, to get it to a point where we can post something to react to, so we can do more proactive feedback? Because now this is me speaking. As far as the public comment period goes, and even looking at the timeline, it's a public comment period. It doesn't really do anything to impact the final report and recommendations, in my experience and stuff with all this, work over the years. So I would love to be able to get public feedback and actually incorporate it versus just, putting it into the public comment period or part of the section of the report, and actually utilize it, because it feels less meaningful, and maybe why we get sometimes less involvement from the public in some of these, trying to get feedback for some of these reports. So there was a lot in there. I guess my question, will any of this be public prior to the public comment period so that they can respond to and suggest ideas and tweaks before we get to the final draft version of it?
So I would assume that September 30th would be a core kind of time period because you all want to feel confident that that you've voted on the recommendations in the draft. So anytime between the 30th and the 17th, we could be going through the formatting edits and also be incorporating whatever public comment if you wanted to put it up on the website. It's totally up to you on how you want to do this.
Okay, and I guess then my only comment, a follow-up comment, and I think that's fair, but I would encourage, and I'm going to encourage all the people and stakeholders that I know to watch these videos, watch this one in particular, where we went through all this stuff, where you can pause the screen, look at the recommendations, and use that to your advantage to provide some proactive feedback, if we want to shape this in a more proactive way.
Well, there's another piece which Brad mentioned, and he was talking about dissenting voices, but between now and the end, there's also that piece of the puzzle. We want to make sure that people know that if they want to send in dissents, that it would go into the submitted process, right? So
I have a question as far as keeping things within appropriate mandate. Are we allowed to share some of the drafts with our stakeholders if it's not posted on the website yet, or do we need to wait until that is posted on the website? I guess is my question, if we're looking for some constructive feedback to be incorporated.
I mean, my take on it is that what we've talked about in the past, Laura, is that we had all decided not to send out sections of the website, or sorry, sections of the report, because we wanted to make sure that it was in line with the council members and their recommendations. So that's why I pointed to that September 30th time period as the place at which maybe that opens up that Josh is suggesting, and that between the 30th and the final report that people can roll in with information, and that we could consider those things. It's just going to be really difficult to make changes without bringing people together. So, and it is, you know, you could go back and make a decision about public reporting before the 30th. It's just, that's what we had originally decided as a group. So it could be that you open this up and say, well, let's decide to start putting rough drafts up.
I would like to propose that question in the effort to make sure that we're getting good feedback in a timely manner for you to meet those deadlines.
I mean, if you want to do that, the September 18th is when the rough draft is going to go to everybody. And you could just say we're open because we know enough about what is in the report to feel that that's okay. It is up to you.
Do we need to make like a motion for that and then vote on it?
I don't know.
Well, maybe one thing too to consider is, you know, we'll get that rough draft. It'll be included in the packet for the September 30th meeting. At which point, you know, that's public, and that packet, you know, is going to be posted to the website for folks to pull the agenda, to get the link or whatever. And then anybody at that point could provide public comment or send in emails for that September 30th meeting and incorporate it, you know, at that point moving forward. And that seems like a good date to potentially start. This stuff will be closer to the finish line then at that point.
I'm sorry, did you say post it prior to the September 30th meeting, or post it on September 30th?
Well, I guess my understanding is that the agenda is posted prior to the meeting. And I guess I haven't checked to see if the packet's included on the website or not. I just assumed it was. I'm so used to city council packets and everything being posted, you know, multiple days ahead of a council meeting for public to review. So I'm open, but I see Brad unmuted and the video on, so perhaps he wants to weigh in.
Yeah, I'm not going to give legal advice to the group or anything like that, but I think the thing that people need to remember is that we're part of a council and we have fiduciary duties among each other, duties of candor and disclosure, and, you know, to protect the information that we have. There is nothing that prohibits anybody here from doing their due diligence by seeking input from other people, stakeholders or whatever, about whatever draft you receive and the like. The thing that I think people need to be careful about is, you know, throwing out on social media, on a Facebook page, you know, here's the report, leads and can lead to confusion when it's a draft that hasn't been approved by the whole council yet. And so that's my kind of general admonition or caution to people, is that seek as much advice and input as you can or you feel you need to do. But I'm going to do that. I actually represent the Minnesota County Attorneys Association, and there are people that I will likely confer with about things and explain things to them, but I'm not going to just post it out there, because that's really the responsibility of the council.
That's a great point.
So for the I'm sorry. I was going to say, for the purpose of notes, am I hearing correctly? The suggestion now is to to use the public comment period as the time of posting the report for public comments once the council has approved the report.
Yeah, and obviously to maybe Laura's comment, and I'm not speaking for her, but you know, if there are, and summarizing what Brad said, you know, I'm gonna reach out to my stakeholders, make sure that they understand, you know, what's going on so far, get their input and feedback so that I can bring it back to the September 30th or in the interim as it shapes out here. And then, you know, for the public comment period to be that official one in October, once we have moved everything forward. So, and that is not attorney advice or legal advice from Anoka County.
Yes, I just more wanted to be clear on how it was okay to share information, so that I was maintaining within our boundaries.
I think that's fair. And Jen, to the slide coming up here towards the end, do we need to do something with that roll call vote before we close up here?
You know, I think we were planning on a variety of different outcomes perhaps. And so I don't know if this one necessarily, if we need this at this point. I mean, if you want to do a quick roll call on confidence level, given the timeline that's been shared and the progress that was made today on the council going through the recommendations, you can certainly do that. I'll leave that up to you. This isn't a set in stone thing.
No, I just wanted to make sure we didn't bypass anything. I mean, I think the discussion is kind of revolved around the extended timeline, getting the approval, quote unquote, and support from DHS leadership and legislative staff. I think we should be good to go. And we didn't hear any disagreement with the general counsel earlier. So seeing where we are, it's 12:01. Are there any other items that anybody needs to chat about or discuss before we close? Hearing none, I will call the meeting to order at 12:01. Thank you everybody for your time today. And for those of you that haven't submitted comments and wanted to, please do so. And then we'll watch for that draft to come out and be ready to dig in further. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Great work, everyone.